Some people say that Halloween is a day that caters to demons. But is it really full of evil intent? Or is it just a fun holiday for dressing up and eating candy? And what's up with the poison candy? Welcome to Truly Terrified, Paranormal versus Physics, where we talk about some really weird stuff and Joe the scientist explains how it's not possible, or maybe it is. I'm Lynn and...
I'm Joe.
Carving pumpkins, trick-or-treating, and wearing silly costumes are some of the time-honored traditions of Halloween. Yet, for many families, it's akin to devil worship, and they forbid their children to participate. Have you ever known anybody who's...
I think I've heard of people who actually do that, or like that.
Oh,
I kind of feel like it's like virtue signaling. It's rhetorical.
Yeah, I don't know. The people I've known who didn't participate in Halloween, besides the Jehovah's Witnesses, because they don't participate in anything like that. They don't even participate in Christmas. But the people that didn't participate in Halloween or allow their children to participate seem to truly believe that it was devil worship. It was evil.
I mean, so imagine, like, even with no context, you see a bunch of people dressing as creepy creatures and going around demanding candy.
Yeah.
It's kind of
weird.
But on the other hand, across history, there's been many traditions where people dress up to scare away spirits. So
that's true, and I'm going to tell you some of them. So here's the real story about Halloween. It has its roots in the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain. That's a pagan celebration to welcome the harvest at the end of summer. People would light bonfires and wear costumes to ward off ghosts. But just in case anyone has any weird ideas about what pagan means, all it means is it's a religious belief other than those of the main or recognized religions. By that definition, at one time, Mormons would have been considered pagans. To Jews, way back when in Jesus' time, Christians would have been considered pagans. So, pagan schmegan, don't let that word trigger you. It does not mean devil worshiper. Okay, so that's out of the way. The festival of Samhain marked the transition to the new year at the end of the harvest and beginning of the winter. The Celtic people believed that during the festival, spirits walked the earth. That sounds far-fetched, except that Christians kind of believe the same sort of things.
Uh-huh.
Not surprisingly, the Christians co-opted the holiday for their own use.
Yeah.
In the 8th century...
Well, I think that's so often the case. Like, you know, like all the cool kids are doing this. And even though I'm religious or our family doesn't do this, I still think it's cool. And then it eventually evolves to everyone's just doing it and you just integrate it. You know?
I think it was more like to try and draw them into Christianity, the pagans, or to kind of diffuse the pagans' rituals by adopting them into Christianity. I don't think
So I could imagine that, but it would require like coordination.
Yeah.
So there'd be a record.
So in the 8th century, Pope Gregory III, never heard of him before today, designated November 1st as a time to honor saints, and he called it All Saints' Day. It incorporated some of the traditions of Samhain and perpetuated the idea of the living coming into contact with the dead around the same time of year. The evening before All Saints' Day was known as All Hallows' Eve, and later, that's what turned into Halloween. It started out a pagan holiday, pagan meaning they weren't Christians, that's all that means.
Uh-huh.
And then the Christians adopted it and twisted it a little bit so that it would fit their traditions, and now we're still doing it, centuries later.
Mm-hmm.
But the tradition of carving pumpkins and hollowing them out and lighting them with candles, those things we call jack-o'-lanterns, that originated in Ireland, only they used turnips instead of pumpkins.
Honestly, I could imagine it because it's probably easier to carve those
and it's
without
smaller.
them busting.
Yeah. The legend is that a man named Stingy Jack repeatedly trapped the devil and only let him go on the condition that Jack would never go to hell. But when Jack died, he learned that heaven didn't want his soul either, so he was forced to wander the earth as a ghost for eternity. The devil gave Jack a burning lump of coal in a carved-out turnip to light his way.
Wow.
Irish locals eventually began carving scary faces into their own turnips to frighten away evil spirits. And now we carve pumpkins.
You know, it's funny. So Halloween can exist without beliefs, right? Like, you don't actually have to believe you're warding away spirits.
Right.
So any beliefs on top of the base of no beliefs, because it can exist without
It's
beliefs.
irrelevant. Yeah.
Any beliefs on top of that are essentially, they're not meaningless because they do kind of change the thing over time, but they're completely unnecessary.
Absolutely. So it would
And
be...
I mean, I'm not saying like, oh, this is believing such and such is better than whatever. I'm just saying, like, you don't have to, like Christmas, you don't have to believe in Santa Claus to have Christmas. And
right.
it's exactly the same,
Right.
essentially.
The tradition of wearing costumes also has an ancient purpose. In order to avoid being terrorized by all those evil spirits that were wandering around during Samhain, the Celts donned disguises so that they wouldn't be mistaken for the spirits and would be left alone. So that was the reason why they did it. Not to honor them, but to protect themselves so that the spirits that were wandering around...
So in the exact same vein of what I was just saying, did they really think that?
Who knows?
I mean, they dressed up on one day because the guy's walking around with a turnip has glowing coal in it. And they're going to dress up so that they don't get mistaken for spirits.
But it's like Christmas, you know.
Yeah.
We're going to put an effigy of Santa Claus on our door.
How about this? Imagine one day in August, someone very credible says, oh my God, the spirits, they're invading early, and we have to dress up to scare them off or whatever. Would people do it?
There are people who would do it.
Yeah, but so like presumably everyone who would do Halloween, would all of them do that?
I don't think so, because that's not why they're doing it.
That's not why I don't think that's why they're actually doing it.
So the whole candy thing is kind of really weird. At first glance, it doesn't really fit into either the Samhain or Christian version of Halloween. There are 3 theories. The first theory says that during Samhain, the Celtic people would leave food out to please the spirits, those spirits that were roaming around at night. Over time, people began to dress as these unearthly beings in exchange for similar offerings of food and drink. So they put out food and drink for the spirits, and then there were people who said, oh, whoa, this is a great deal. And they would dress like a ghost or a monster and go up to the house, and the people would give them food and drink because, oh my God, it's a spirit that has come to my house. What a great idea. What a great idea. These people were really smart.
I mean, if you're assuming that, again, that's what they're...
True. The second theory says that the candy boon stems from the Scottish practice of guising. And when I saw the word guising, I thought, what a weird word. I wonder what the root is in Scottish, you know? It actually just is a version of the word disguising. So it's guising.
Guising.
Yeah. So during the Middle Ages, children and really poor adults, so really poor people, would collect food and money from local homes in return for prayers for the dead on All Souls Day. So they'd go to your house and they'd say, oh, I'll pray for your dead loved one if you give me a loaf of bread and a pie. And so they'd hand over the food and the person would toddle off to the next house and say, I want a leg of lamb or whatever. So that was another way that people were capitalizing on these beliefs. The guisers, those disguisers, dropped the prayers in favor of non-religious things like songs, jokes, and tricks in return for the handout. So that's how it kind of evolved. Yeah. You know, so maybe they'd come to a door and say, I'll pray for your loved one. And the person would say, no, that's all right. I don't need your prayers. And they'd say, okay, well, I'll do a jig. Will you give me bread for a jig? And then you got a crazy person dressed like a ghost on your front steps dancing. You give them bread to make them go away.
It's interesting. You can, if that's the case, that's how it evolved. It was like a minority group doing the prayers. Some larger groups saw them doing the prayers, so they wanted to do it, but not everyone would. The whole of the population would not cater to those people because it's now a larger group of people.
Right.
And so they have to then evolve.
Yeah.
And then the whole process evolves.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's pretty fascinating how that happened. So there's one more theory that I found, and it says that modern American trick-or-treating stems from Belsnickeling. That's a German-American Christmas tradition. Belsnickel is a Santa Claus type of character, only not for Christmas. So Belsnickeling is
Acting like Belsnickel?
I guess acting like Belsnickel. I don't know. So in that tradition, the children dress in costumes and call on their neighbors to see if the adults could guess who they are. The children were rewarded with food and treats if no one could identify them. So, okay, now we're getting more to modern, kind of the modern idea of Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
That you dress up and you go to the door and you say, "Can you guess who I am?" And they give you a treat. But until the mid-20th century, the treats children received weren't necessarily candy. They might get fruit or nuts or coins or even toys. It really just mattered what the people had on hand or what they decided they wanted to hand out. Candy was not the big deal. Trick-or-treating rose in popularity in the 1950s, and it inspired candy companies to market, capitalizing small individually wrapped candies. People began to favor those pre-wrapped candies just because it was way more convenient than having to go and bake a bunch of cookies or search out little things little treats to hand out. But that didn't dominate other treats until the 1970s, when parents started fearing anything unwrapped. More about why they were afraid later. So let's just go into one famous candy for Halloween. Candy corn.
Yeah.
Do you like candy corn?
I don't really like it that much.
I think candy corn's great. I like it. I bite off the pointy end, I nibble down to the end, pop it in my mouth. Candy corn, okay. So candy corn has an interesting history. In 1898, candy corn was developed by the Goelitz Company. I'm assuming that was a candy company. Couldn't find anything about it. They originally called it chicken feed. And
makes sense. It looks like corn.
Right. It's sold in boxes with the slogan, "Something worth crowing for." It was just a candy sold during autumn because of corn's association with harvest. Candy corn later became Halloween specific when trick-or-treating grew in popularity in the U.S. during the 1950s. So now we're getting closer and closer to modern day practices.
Mm-hmm.
And modern day Halloween, if anyone is listening and isn't familiar with modern day Halloween, in my mind, it consists of children dressing up however they want to dress up. Some children dress up like popular characters from TV or movies. Some dress as scary things like ghosts or witches. Some dress up like things they want to be when they grow up. Army men, bums.
Some people dress up as sluts. That's a big...
It is a big problem.
It's just like I think kids probably shouldn't aspire to dress like that because there's no point.
Well,
really
I don't think kids look at a slut costume and think, "Oh, this is a person who is sexually promiscuous."
Seeing that, they're seeing that on the streets.
Yes.
So it's not inherently a bad thing, but that's like a super common thing.
Okay, so here's another way Halloween has changed over the years. When I was a kid, it was really common to kind of cycle through a few Halloween costume choices, and for girls, gypsy was like a really popular choice. Being a gypsy is now socially unacceptable. It is considered cultural appropriation.
You know what's funny? There are real Romani people still.
Yes, and that's why they
just are like living their lives.
And to call them gypsies is also insulting to them. But when I was a kid, you'd take your mom's scarves, wrap them around your head, and you'd take one of her skirts and you'd put all her jewelry around your neck, and you call yourself a gypsy and you traipse off down the street. Another popular one was being Indian. Well, that you can't do that anymore. That's at least if you go by anything on social media, that is absolutely not okay.
It's crazy. It's like you could go to, well, I don't know if it's a generic term for real Native American get together. And, depending on where you are, that it could be accurate to wear feathers. They actually do that
Yes,
at the
they actually
modern
do
day.
that. Just like the videos I saw a few years ago of white people would be wearing braids and they would be called out for cultural appropriation because they had these braids.
Is cultural appropriation valuable in and of itself? Like, is there inherently a bad thing with cultural
I think that
appropriation?
if you were, I don't think so, but then I'm not of a different, I'm not black, I'm not Native American, I'm not, Japanese, I'm not Romani. So I don't see what that is, unless what you were doing is you were dressing up like a gypsy and acting like a slut, or you were dressing up like a black person and doing some kind of horrible parody of,
black culture,
or, all of those things. That's wrong. That's wrong. I understand that.
Yeah.
But just to say, wow, I think this is really amazing to put on this costume.
How about this? Dressing up as Zeus. Would that be cultural appropriation?
Well, maybe there are people who would view that as cultural appropriation.
How about this? Dressing up as Jesus.
There are people who would probably view that as a really positive thing.
Or Moses. Are we getting farther away from...
I think that the Christian culture would not view that as
how about this?
Appropriation.
Dressing up as Muhammad.
I think that you might have a problem.
You might have a problem.
I think you might actually, if you were in the Middle East, you might be killed.
Yeah, it's treated more seriously.
Yeah. Okay, I don't know how we went off on that. Okay, so let's go back to the candy. Here's the thing about candy.
It tastes good.
It does taste good. When I was a little kid, you'd forget the little plastic jack-o'-lantern thing. Forget the cutesy little bag that somebody wrote on it. We took frickin' pillowcases and went door to door, and everybody answered their door and gave you candy. And we would get pillowcases full of candy and bring it home. You got lots more than the kids probably get today, I think, when you were a kid.
Yeah.
And that's
I remember
in a
it'd be like multiple trash bags full.
Yeah. So when I was a kid, nobody ever said, don't eat all your candy at one time or dole it out.
Or you get sick or what?
Nobody ever said that. Well, I mean, somebody might have said you're going to get sick, but my parents did not say, you cannot eat your candy. They didn't say you can only have 3 pieces of candy
to space it out or something.
Right. And nobody ever, ever, ever went through our candy and looked for razor blades and apples. And we did get apples or signs of tampering. Nobody ever did. But when you were a kid, I definitely looked at your candy because, first of all, we didn't have the internet as we know it now. So you hear these things and you think, well, crap. God, there's crazy people out there going to poison the children.
Even though your chances of that happening are like less than you being struck by lightning. So
why do you think we believe, some people more than others, that kids get poisoned by Halloween candy every year?
Believe? So this is how I think of it. You have in your brain like a chance estimator. What are the chances of XYZ happening? And it's really not very good. Your brain will tell you the chances of certain things are way higher or way lower than they actually are, which kind of makes sense. It's probably really hard to actually estimate the precise chance of things. But if you look at like statistics of like people getting poisoned by Halloween candy or like razor blades in Halloween candy, it's very few isolated cases. Yeah. And probably condition on like they knew the people or they hated the people. It doesn't matter, especially when the news is showing those isolated cases. It doesn't matter that the statistics are it's just like extremely unlikely that would happen to you. Your brain is now estimating that there's a threat that's really high. Like, for instance, if there was a 1 in a million chance 1 in a million chance that you'd get hit by a car if you stepped out in the road, would you step out in the road? How you feel, like what do you estimate the chances are mentally is probably totally off. You're good. You can step across the road. You're not going to get hit by a car in that case. The chances of you getting poisoned by a candy or having a razor blade are way less than that.
They're even lower than you think. Let me tell you. So first of all, the claims of candy being poisoned or in some way tampered with, well, not only candy, but any treats handed out at Halloween, gained sort of a general credence during the Industrial Revolution. And it's probably because food production was moving away from the home and into factories where people didn't know those people. Strangers were preparing your food. So there was already a general mistrust of how it's being done. So people are already kind of getting paranoid, so that okay, I'll buy that. And some doctors publicly claimed that they were treating children poisoned by candy every single day. But it turned out that there were no cases of illness or death ever proven from eating candy. The kids probably got sick from the candy from eating too much.
You do have to consider the candy itself is almost like poison if you eat enough of it.
Right.
Because it's just pure sugar.
And excitement. They're running around. It's late at night. They're tired. They ate a bunch of candy. Yeah. In the 1890s and 1900s, the U.S. Bureau of Chemistry, I never heard of that. I don't know if it still exists. Probably not. Along with some state agencies, tested hundreds of kinds of candy and found no evidence of poison or tampering. Eventually, the claims that kids were being sickened by candy were put down to indigestion or even food poisoning due to food that their mom cooked them. Yeah. And that was probably because of cooking or hygiene or storage of meat, those sorts of things. Because in that time period, there was probably a widely diverse arena through which people prepared and stored food. There were probably people with so the 1890s to 1900s. Oh,
really?
They probably
poor.
Some people didn't have refrigerators.
Yeah.
Some people probably cooked on wood stoves, and so it took a really long time, and it wasn't up to heat.
Yeah.
Or, all those things. Or maybe their meat wasn't stored properly. But the myths persisted even into the 1960s. Now, I was trick-or-treating in the 1960s. I was trick-or-treating in the early 1970s. And I don't remember anything about it. I mean, maybe it came on the news, but obviously we just didn't pay any attention. Or maybe my mother was hoping we'd be poisoned and she'd be done with the burden of having 6 children. But in any case, in the 60s and 70s, it was full bore. Media has also blossomed into the, not quite what it is today, but it was getting there. And they caused what is known as a rumor panic. So somebody says, my cousin's best friend's something another, ate a chiclet and it turned out it had rat poison in it. And then, it changes like a game of telephone. And then it gets to some overzealous newscaster who writes an entire story segment on the news, and you start that rumor panic. But all that aside, here are the only real cases I could find. In 1959, a California dentist named William Shine gave candy-coated laxative pills to trick-or-treaters. He was charged with outrage of public decency and unlawful dispensing of drugs.
So the kids were shitting all over.
Yeah,
they didn't get hurt.
They probably didn't know what was wrong with them. They probably got horrible stomach cramps and then had diarrhea.
Yeah.
And so who knows?
Oh, I can't. It would just be like pure candy coming out the other end.
Oh. In 1964.
It's a candy dispenser.
Oh. Okay, so 5 years later, a Long Island, New York woman gave out packages of inedible objects to children who she believed were too old to be trick-or-treating. The packages contained items such as steel wool, dog biscuits, and ant poison.
Wait, it wasn't like, it was clear you weren't supposed to eat them?
Well, who in their right mind would think, oh, I got a steel wool pad, I think I'll try and eat it.
Yeah.
It must be cotton candy.
It wasn't like, Oh, she dunked them in chocolate or something.
I don't think so. Now, the ant poison, there might be a child stupid enough
To eat it, yeah.
because they were the little cakes that the ants come up and nibble
Uh-huh.
on. You know, there might be a kid that, and that's really horrible. But nobody was injured. She was prosecuted, pleaded guilty, and sentenced. That same year, there were media reports of lye-filled bubble gum being handed out in Detroit and rat poison being given in Philadelphia, but they were never proven to be actual events.
So, like, no one came to any ERs and
no.
had an issue.
Reports and copycat incidents peaked shortly after the Chicago Tylenol murders, which were first reported 1 month before Halloween and continued into October 1982. Further adding to the myth of candy tampering, people were looking to the fact that somebody was able to go into a store and put, I think it was arsenic, in the Tylenol capsules. You know, take a box away, open them up, put the poison in the capsules, put it back together, put it back on the shelf. People would buy it, and people died. There were
Was that
several
before
people.
the seals?
Yeah, that is actually one of the
Yeah.
things that caused them to start putting tamper-proof packaging on with the seal on it and the seal over the thing. So, you know, there's a lot of steps you got to go to. And if any one of those things are in the chain of opening your bottle are broken, you aren't going to use it. Also, they kind of moved away from capsules and turned to caplets, you know, tablets that are shaped like a capsule.
Yeah.
The Chicago Tylenol murders involved an unidentified murderer. They've never identified who it was, who tampered with and added poison to only a few bottles of over-the-counter medication, Tylenol. It was after the medication had been delivered to stores, not before. So it's not like they worked in a factory. It happened at the stores, and it did result in the deaths of several people, like I said, who took the Tylenol. So
That's not candy.
that's not
Halloween.
candy, but that fueled that fear. You know, they've been hearing about it for decades, you know, a few decades by that time. And now here's a case where people are dying because someone was able to tamper with a product in the store, and people not thinking it through, again, acting just out of fear and whatever, just thought, holy shit, you know, someone could inject this Snickers bar with something or whatever.
They still could.
Yeah, they could.
I mean, if
Yeah,
you
they
just
could.
took a hypodermic needle.
But you don't have to wait for frickin' Halloween.
No.
Just go. I mean,
You could-
not that
you
I'm
could-
saying anyone should do this,
Yeah.
but, and I'm not going to give specifics of how you could do it, but you could certainly do it.
I mean, it really doesn't take out of the box thinking.
No, it does not. No.
But on the other hand, if I was getting like a potato or an apple or whatever and saw a big old hole in it, you know,
Yeah,
I wouldn't eat it.
exactly. And when we buy something from the store and there's not the seal's been broken or there's not a wrap around it, we don't keep it. We don't buy it. We don't do it.
Probably for other reasons, though. I mean, like, if you saw there was a seal broken on a bottle of pills, like, I'd be concerned about the quality of the pills more than someone's poison.
So let me tell you this. This is so gross. So fancy hotel. They stock the little refrigerator with bottles of water, and some of them have little cocktail drinks you can get. And if you take any of them out, you get charged for them. So when the people come to clean the room and they go through the inventory, if a tiny little airline bottle of scotch is missing from the refrigerator, then that person's tab gets billed for it. So they go to this hotel room to clean it. There's little bottles, and the little bottles have the right color liquid in them, and everything looks fine. The next people to check in that room open up the little bottle, go to pour it in, and they realize it's urine.
Oh.
So a previous occupant of the room drank the booze, peed in the bottle, put the lid back on so they wouldn't get charged for it. So let me tell you, you got worse things to worry about than somebody putting, you know, whatever in Halloween candy.
In your,
Joel Best, who is a sociologist at the University of Delaware, he collected newspaper reports from 1958 to 1983 in search of evidence of candy tampering. He found fewer than 90 cases that might have qualified as actual candy tampering. In none of the cases does he attribute the events to random attempts to harm children during the Halloween holiday. Instead, most of those cases were attempts by adults to gain financial compensation the adults in the children's lives to get
Yeah.
financial compensation, or more commonly, by children to get attention.
Yeah.
So a child is going to go stick a razor blade in their apple. Mom, there's a razor blade in my apple. Oh my God. Almost all tampering cases at a rate of 1 or 2 per year. 1 or 2 per year.
Yeah.
How many million children are
Yeah.
out there doing this? Involve a friend or a family member, usually as a prank. Almost
Yeah.
all of these involve sharp objects rather than poison. 3/4 of them result in absolutely no injuries, and the rest result in only minor injuries. No child has ever been killed by eating a Halloween candy from a stranger.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's pretty damning that the about the security aspect, anything related to preventing that, there's probably been some effect from preventative measures on people putting stuff in
I
food
think
and
hygiene is a big deal, you know, and
Yeah.
when I was a kid, there was loose candy, and kids would just stick their hand in the bowl
Yeah.
of loose candy.
Yeah.
And when I think about it now, I almost get a little pukey
That is
because
gross.
it's really gross, you know. You know where kids' hands have been
Yeah.
and where they have not been, like under hot water and soap.
Yeah.
So that's really kind of gross. But other than that, you know, I don't know. Also, there are some old people who probably keep Halloween candy from one year to the next. If they don't give it away, they just put it back up in the cupboard.
Yeah.
So who knows if
Christmas
it's had
decorations.
ants and rats nibbling on it or
Yeah.
whatever. Gross.
So nowadays, it's this huge security theater where kids are corralled into like one designated street. And then
Yeah.
it's probably not like this everywhere, but it's like this here.
Like the trunk or treating
And then
thing.
with trunk or treating,
Yeah.
and older kids just aren't doing it as much, as far as I can tell. So it's like really young kids being marched along by their parents through a very fixed course, very small, you know, like just one block. Not necessarily saying that's a better than, you know, just like everyone's going up and down all the streets, whatever. My experience in the past of the best Halloweens were all just free range, you know, you just go to all the
And there were
streets
lots
late
of
into
people.
the night.
Yeah.
And so I think I know that the kids then are getting that particular experience.
Yeah.
And
There's something almost magical about going out. First of all, it's after dark.
yeah,
And it's the end of October, so it's really kind of chilly when it hasn't been very chilly before then.
yeah,
And there's other kids out there, and everybody's dressed weird, so you don't really know who everybody is. And you're going up to doors of people that you've probably never spoken to before, and they're acting nice to you, which is a novelty, and they're giving you candy, which is a greater novelty. And I think it's just really a fun holiday. And I think that the fear-mongering has taken away a favorite ritual of childhood that really was just a fun thing. It's
Yeah.
just a fun thing. It's not evil. It's nothing. And actually, modern day Halloween has nothing to do with the pagan festival of Samhain. It has nothing to do with Pope, whatever his name was, and his All Souls Eve. It has nothing to do with that.
yeah.
This
Well,
is
as
something
I
completely
said,
different.
you don't have you. It's not a requirement to believe it.
Right.
From that fact, it has nothing to do with the earlier beliefs.
Right.
Now, I think that people, so it's probably, again, it's not like that everywhere where the kids they only do the trunk or treating and it's one block, whatever. Probably not like that everywhere. But I think it's Halloween, and this history of it is evolving towards that in particular. Well, it's not just trunk or treating in one small block evolving towards that. It's also evolving towards Halloween parties. So Halloween parties, it's not like you're going to people's houses. It's a party. To me, it seems more like an opportunity to cosplay than anything else,
Yeah, I could see that. Now,
which is half the fun of Halloween, but it's not the same. Structured environments are not the same as unstructured environments.
I agree, and you don't learn as much from structured environments as you do from unstructured environments. When I was a kid, there were probably people who had Halloween parties, but I didn't know, I had never heard of anybody having a Halloween party, but it makes sense. I mean, we'd have a Halloween party at school where everybody come to school on the day closest to Halloween, except not on November 1st because that was Nevada Day and the schools were closed on Nevada Day. Or sometimes that fell on, they'd celebrate Nevada Day on the 31st because, that maybe Nevada Day fell on Saturday. And so we'd have Friday off. In our childish minds, we thought it was because it was Halloween because we didn't realize. But as a young adult, everyone I knew threw Halloween parties and it was great fun, but it didn't take the place of Halloween. It's just that this was an added fun thing you did. You went to somebody's house and you did stupid games, and usually there was alcohol because we were young adults, and everybody dressed up and, acted silly and goofy, and then that was it. And that was just the whole thing. We have never had a trick-or-treater come to the door in the last 20 years, except for grandkids, or one time some clients of mine came to the door with all their kids because I specifically told them, I have made cupcakes for your children for Halloween.
Yeah, so
come
they knew.
to our door. So they came to our door. I gave them the cupcakes, which I found out later horribly stained everything in sight. And I will never use that black food coloring again. And so nobody has ever come to the door trick-or-treating in 20 years. And I miss that because to me, on this side of the door, it's fun to open the door and see some little kid. They're nervous. They're trying to say trick or treat. They can hardly speak. The parents are standing down there coaching them. You give them some candy. Their eyes open real big. It's fun to see how they're dressed up and they're proud of their costume, or they're shy, or they're excited, or whatever. That's fun. Knowing that you kids would go out trick-or-treating up until just a few years ago, that was fun. If a grown-ass man came to my door on Halloween night and held a bag out, I would give him candy. And I will have candy in this house in case he comes to the door, and I will give him candy. Because frickin' A, you came to the door. You made an effort. One year, a few years ago, I was sitting on Chrissy's front porch, and nobody had come to the doors for Halloween, and a guy clearly drunk rode his bike around the corner, wobbling back and forth. And I don't remember, we must have hauled out something at him. You want some candy or something?
I think you did.
And then he said, yeah. And he came over and he took handfuls of the candy. And then he drove off down the street, wobbling back and forth. You know what? Who cares how old they are? It's not because they're hungry children and we're giving them candy. If they were hungry children, we'd give them turnips. We'd give them potatoes. We'd give them grocery bags of good food. We wouldn't give them candy. You're not giving it to them because they deserve it innately because they're children. It's because it's all fun.
Yeah.
Why can't it just be fun?
Because you're estimating the chance of something bad happening way badly, mentally.
Okay. My parents never examined my trick-or-treat candy, like I said, but I always did with my kids. Although I never said, you could only have one piece. I said, eat it up as fast as you can because bugs will get in it, and once bugs get in, I'm throwing it out. Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Ants or something. Next week, we'll go further into Halloween month. A special thanks to our newest patrons, Carrie, Rook, and Margaret. Our contact information is in the show notes. You can email us, text us, or even call and leave a 3-minute voicemail. And as always, if you have a story you want to tell, send it to us. Please share, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and never be so terrified you don't eat the candy.